Today is appearance day, right, Prabhu?
Yes, today is the appearance day.
Okay.
I think you should be live. Hold on. Yes, Prabhu, I think you are live. Yes, today is the appearance day, Prabhu. I think you are live, right, Prabhu? You can start, I think.
Okay, Prabhu. Hare Krishna, everyone. Today we are going to sing Ohe Vaishnav Thakur for this divine day of BhaktiSiddhanta Saraswati Maharaj appearance day, who is the spiritual master of His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. So yeah, you all can join me. Ohe Vaishnav Thakur Doyar Sagar Dasi Karuna Kori. Ohe Vaishnav Thakur Doyar Sagar Dasi Karuna Kori. Diya pad chaya chodo hai amaya. Diya pad chaya chodo hai amaya. Tumar charana dhuri. Ohe Vaishnav Thakur Doyar Sagar Dasi Karuna Kori. Chaya Vega Domi Chaya Dusha Soti Chaya Guna Devu Dasi. Chaya Vega Domi Chaya Dusha Soti Chaya Guna Devu Dasi. Chaya Satsanga Devo Amare. Chaya Satsanga Deho hai hamare wo sachi sange raste. Ohe Vaishnav Thakur Doyar Sagar Dasi Karuna Kori. Ekaki amara nahi paya bala Hari Nama Sankirtane. Ekaki amara nahi paya bala Hari Nama Sankirtane. Tumi kripa kori Shraddha bindu diya. Tumi kripa kori Shraddha bindu diya. Deho Krishna name dhare. Ohe Vaishnav Thakur Doyar Sagar Dasi Karuna Kori. Krishna se tomara Krishna dite paro tomara shakti ache. Krishna se tomara Krishna dite paro tomara shakti ache. Ami to kangal Krishna Krishna boli. Ami to kangal Krishna Krishna boli. Daita pache pache. Ohe Vaishnav Thakur Doyar Sagar Dasi Karuna Kori. Ohe Vaishnav Thakur Doyar Sagar Dasi Karuna Kori. Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prishtaya Bhutale Srimati Bhakti Vedanta Swami Niti Namine. Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prishtaya Bhutale Srimati Bhakti Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Vashya Deshkarine Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Srivasadi Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare Hare Radha Natvar Shirare Jaya Giri Govardhan Jaya Giri Govardhan Jaya Giri Govardhan Jaya Vrindavan Dham Jaya Jagannath Jaya Jagannath Jaya Baladeva Jaya Subhadra Mai Jaya Gaurani Tai Jaya Gaurani Tai Jaya Pavan Gaurani Tai Jaya Prabhupada Jaya Prabhupada Jaya Prabhupada Srila Prabhupada Jaya Vaishnava Thakur Jaya Vaishnava Thakur Jaya Vaishnava Thakur Jaya Vaishnava Thakur Jai Gaur Premanande Hari Hari Bol. So now we can read the translation. I will read the first one and then all of you can read the other. The first translation says, O venerable Vaishnava, devotee of Krishna, O ocean of mercy, be merciful unto your servant. Give me the shade of your lotus feet and purify me. I hold on to your lotus feet. Anyone wants to read the other translations?
Teach me to control my 6 passions, rectify my 6 faults, bestow upon me the 6 qualities, and offer unto me the 6 kinds of holy association.
I do not find the strength to carry on alone the Sankirtan of the holy name of Hari. Please bless me by giving me just 1 drop of faith with which to obtain the great treasure of the holy name of Krishna.
Last one is Prabhu. Krishna is yours. You have the power to give him to me. I am simply your servant running behind you shouting Krishna, Krishna. That one, Prabhu, any thoughts you want to share about this bhajan or should we?
Yeah, this is an amazing bhajan actually. I love this bhajan. And since today is BhaktiSiddhanta Saraswati Maharaj appearance day, BhaktiSiddhanta Saraswati Srila Prabhupada appearance day. So this is a very nice bhajan to meditate on. And then as we can see in this bhajan that by serving Vaishnava and by basically mercifully begging Krishna from the spiritual master, one from the Vaishnava Thakur, who is like the devotees of the Lord, or from the spiritual master, who is also the devotee of the Lord, one can attain Krishna.
Correct. Prabhu, the particular lines I like this, like this last paragraph is really touching. No, it clearly says, Krishna is yours. You have the power to give him to me. So it makes it very clear, like what is the role of spiritual master and who has got Krishna. No, nothing else. The spiritual master has got Krishna, and I am simply your servant running behind you shouting Krishna, Krishna. So that's all. So for me, everything is the spiritual master, right? So that's what it's amazing. This last paragraph is really very touching. Any other thoughts before we start our program today? So, okay, Darpan Prabhu, thank you so much.
Thank you, Prabhu.
For the Kirtan. And welcome everybody. I see a few participants who have joined the call. Thank you everybody for joining on this auspicious day, the appearance day of His Divine Grace, Srila BhaktiSiddhanta Saraswati Thakur Maharaj. And our program for today evening is starting now. We will have a discourse by His Grace, Her Grace Rukmini Devi Dasi, and this will go on till 8 o'clock. And then from 8 o'clock, we'll have a short Narsimha prayers. So that's the plan. And today, and I think most of the people have know about Rukmini Mataji. And if I've just she has been with our congregation for last 5 years now. Rukmini Mataji, you have been in Columbus.
It's 6.5.
6.5 years, yes. And as I was introducing last time, Mataji is the walking encyclopedia of Gaudiya Vaishnavism. So if you need anything about Gaudiya Vaishnavism, Mataji can definitely help. So you can start, Mataji. Hare Krishna. Mataji, I made you co-host also. Anytime you want to share your screen, please feel free to do so. Thank you.
Yes, I will be doing that very soon. So thank you so much for that kind introduction and for kindly inviting and arranging this program for Srila Prabhupada BhaktiSiddhanta Saraswati Thakur's appearance day. So I shall share my screen. Alright, so the topic for today is Srila BhaktiSiddhanta Saraswati Thakur Prabhupada, Divine Genius and Gaudiya Vaishnava Revolutionary. And so let me start by advancing my slide. Let me start by offering my obeisances to my Guru Varga, pictured here. Om Jnana Timirandhasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurun Militan Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namah Namong Vishnupadaya Shri Gauru Priyamurtaya Shrimati Bhakti Vallabh Tirtha Goswami Namine Namong Vishnupadaya Gauru Prashtaya Bhutale Shrimad Bhakti Pramadaya Puri Goswami Namine. And then let us together, so we all can say together, Namo Vishnupadaya Krishna Prashtaya Bhutale Shrimate Bhaktivedanta Swami Niti Namine Namaste Saraswate Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Deshatarine. And then we can say the pranam mantras of Srila Prabhupada BhaktiSiddhanta Saraswati Thakur together, whose appearance day it is today. Namo Vishnupadaya Krishna Prashtaya Bhutale Shrimate BhaktiSiddhanta Saraswati Iti Namine. Shri Barsha Bhanavi Devi Doitai Kripabdhaye Krishna Sambandha Vijnana Daine Prabhave Namah. Madhu Jojjala Premadha Shri Rupanuga Bhaktida Shri Gaura Karuna Shakti Vigrahaya Namostute. Namaste Gauravani Shri Murtaye Dinatarine Rupanuga Viruddha Apasiddhanta Dvanta Harine. And then I just wanted to mention that today, besides being the appearance day of Srila Prabhupada BhaktiSiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, it is also the 25th disappearance anniversary of Srila Gaur Govinda Swami. So there is not time to give justice or anything even close to justice to Srila Gaur Govinda Swami's holy life. Everything about him was very uncommon. He was a Mahabhagavat Uttamadhikari Vaishnava. So I'm referring you to these sources. Cry for Krishna is a very brief life sketch of His Divine Grace by some of his disciples, Parantapa Das, Raghava Pandit Das, and Gokul Das. And let me see if I can paste this into the chat. Apparently I cannot do anything like that while I am in the slideshow. Anyway, so I will paste all these links into the chat at the end. So here are some sources. Here is his life. There's some publications of his book. So one of his books is, for instance, Trinadapi Sunichena. So he has, and then another of his books is The Embankment of Separation. So these are very wonderful books, and these are by Gopaljiu Publications and Tattva Vichar Publications. You can go on their website and find out more about their books, and some of their books are also online. And because it is the 25th year's festival, there have been, starting from Sunday, there have been several hours each day of wonderful remembrances. So if you go onto Facebook, his disciple Madhavananda Prabhu, whose Facebook link is here, he has been hosting live videos with, from all over the world, many, many remembrances of Srila Gaur Govinda Swami. So I will just very briefly say a couple things about him. So he appeared in 1929, and his name was Brajabandhu, and he appeared in a lineage in Jagannath Pur, which is near Jagannath Puri in the state of Orisha, and it was a lineage of disciples of descending from Shyamananda Pandit. So he was born in a Vaishnava family, and from childhood he was engaged in deity worship, in going and singing to the public kirtans. His family lineage, the Godaigiris, were famous for singing kirtans and in worshipping the deity of Gopal. So this Gopal Jew is named after Gopal. And when he was 45, he left household life and he became a spiritual seeker. And so then he was touring India looking for spiritual perfection. And when he came to Vrindavan, then he found some Western devotees, and he found that they were making true the prophecy that the holy name of Mahaprabhu would be preached all over the world. So 2 weeks later, he finally had his first darshan of Srila Prabhupada A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami, and I'll read a little bit from this cry for Krishna. When Shri Brajabandhu, a disheveled sadhu, entered Srila Prabhupada's room and introduced himself, the first question Srila Prabhupada asked was, "Have you taken sannyas?" Brajabandhu replied that he had not. "Then I will give you sannyas," Srila Prabhupada said. Understanding that Srila Prabhupada knew his heart, Brajabandhu surrendered himself at Srila Prabhupada's lotus feet. Srila Prabhupada at once arranged a room for him and engaged him in translating back to Godhead into Hindi. Within a year, Srila Prabhupada gave him first and second initiation. And then, some time later, in 1975, at the opening of ISKCON's Shri Krishna Balaram Mandir, so that's still just a little bit later, Srila Prabhupada awarded him the order of sannyas, giving him the name Gaur Govinda Swami Maharaj. And then after that, in 1991, after 16 years of determined endeavor, Srila Gaur Govinda Swami fulfilled the instruction of his spiritual master with the opening of a magnificent temple of Shri Krishna Balaram, which now attracts thousands of people to Krishna consciousness. Srila Gaur Govinda Swami said, "I have opened a crying school here in Bhubaneswar." So this is the origin of this term, cry for Krishna. "Unless we cry for Krishna, we cannot get his mercy." End quote. This was the message he preached so vigorously all over the world during the last 10 years of his manifest pastimes. And so 5 years later, in 1996, he disappeared on Srila Prabhupada BhaktiSiddhanta Saraswati Thakur's appearance day. And everything about his life was uncommon, so I hope that you all look at his life, and I also pray for his mercy on this day. So without further ado, then I will launch into the study of Srila BhaktiSiddhanta Saraswati Thakur with quite an interesting quote. So this is a quote on institutions. "The idea of an organized church in an intelligible form indeed marks the close of the living spiritual movement. The great ecclesiastical establishments are the dikes and the dams to retain the current that cannot be held by any such contrivances. They indeed indicate a desire on the part of the masses to exploit a spiritual movement for their own purpose. They also unmistakably indicate the end of the absolute and unconventional guidance of the bona fide spiritual teacher." So this is quite a strong and startling statement. So this you can find in the article Putana in The Harmonist from January 1932. The Harmonist magazine was this magazine published by Srila Prabhupada BhaktiSiddhanta Saraswati Thakur. And incidentally, you can find much about this article Putana also on Madhavananda Prabhu's Facebook page in earlier months. So this then presents quite a quandary, because here in this quote, Srila Prabhupada Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur is saying that the institutions mark the close of the spiritual movement, but wait a minute, he's the one who institutionalized Gaudiya Vaishnavism. So this seems to be a paradox. How can this be? And furthermore, so I'll quote from a letter he wrote. So he's writing to a disciple of his. "I received your card dated November 26th and another letter following that. Srimad Bhagavatam has instructed us not to praise or criticize others' nature or activities. It is said also in Sri Chaitanya Bhagavat that one goes to hell by criticizing others. My instruction to you is not to criticize others, but to correct and purify yourself. And he says, I am forced to criticize my own disciples and those who have come to me for instruction. I do not understand why you would go out of your way to try to perform such a difficult task. So here in this letter, he himself is saying what a difficult position he is in, and he's in that difficult position because he started this institution. So again, we have a mystery that it's becoming curiouser and curiouser. How did he decide to do this? So incidentally, this letter, this is a translation from the Bengali, and it appeared in this book, Prabhupada Saraswati Thakur, which was the second English biography to appear in the West. And so this was translated into English from the Bengali by my late mother, Devi Dasi. So next I'm going to quote from a talk that she gave 9 years ago, where she was resolving this paradox. Why did he engage in this institutionalization? So this was a talk that she gave on the appearance day of Srila BhaktiSiddhanta Saraswati Thakur on February 12th, 2012. And there's a video and transcript of this talk is also available. What Srila Prabhupada Saraswati Thakur did, that is so amazing. That is one of the most amazing things in the history of religion, because he institutionalized this Gaudiya Vaishnava Dharma, which was never done before. So what was contained in a few devotees, he gave it to many. He made an institution so it will come out of this treasure trove and it will go to the public. This was never done in the history of India, which is the place of Bhagavad Dharma, the eternal principles of religion. Even in India, this was never done. What he did was totally unique, totally new, and revolutionary. Like Srimad Bhagavatam says that these words of Srimad Bhagavatam, they can cause a revolution, right? But who made that revolution possible? Srila Prabhupada Saraswati Thakur. Because revolution cannot be a thing of few people. Revolution means it involves many people, millions of people. That's a revolution. And he caused that revolution. After Mahaprabhu, he is the one who caused this revolution to take place in India by making this institution. So the resolution of the paradox is that the institution is created for revolution. And the verse that she was referring to, as she told me later, was this famous verse of Srimad Bhagavatam that we've recently been hearing in Srimad Bhagavatam class. Tadvag visargo janataga viplavo yasmin prati shlokam abadhavatyapi namanyanantasya yashonkitani yat shinvanti gayanti grananti sadhava. So within this verse is the word viplava, revolutionary. And here's the translation. On the other hand, that literature which is full of descriptions of the transcendental glories of the name, fame, forms, pastimes, etc. of the unlimited Supreme Lord is a different creation, full of transcendental words directed towards bringing about a revolution in the impious lives of this world's misdirected civilization. Such transcendental literatures, even though imperfectly composed, are heard, sung, and accepted by purified men who are thoroughly honest. Sorry, I will silence my phone here. So this is the revolution. It is a revolution that comes from these transcendental literatures. So the rest of this talk is about him as a Gaudiya Vaishnava revolutionary. So what was he revolutionizing? How did he do this? Why did he do this? But before all this, where did he do this? So I think actually all of you probably know this, but just for reference, we're talking about a couple of places in India where this revolution started. So we see West Bengal situated on the eastern side of India, and in particular some places that we'll be mentioning. So there's Kolkata, and a bit north of Kolkata is Navadvip and Mayapur. And then also there's within a little bit south of that, on the eastern side of India, near the Bay of Bengal, is the state of Orissa. And within Orissa, there's Bhubaneswar, which we just heard about when we were talking about Srila Gaura Govinda Swami, and there is Jagannath Puri here is Jagannath Puri. So these are some important places in Srila Prabhupada BhaktiSiddhanta Saraswati Thakur's pastimes. So he was a revolutionary because he was a follower of the original revolutionary, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And here is Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is speaking with the Chand Kazi. And this is just after he had started a civil disobedience movement. He had been doing Harinam Sankirtan, playing mridangas and chanting the Mahamantra in the household of Srivas Thakur. And then the Kazi had sent his men to break the mridangas. And then instead of obeying the Kazi and stopping the Sankirtan, they had a torchlit procession where there was Nagar Sankirtan, the first Nagar Sankirtan, which means they went through the city of Navadvip to the house of the Chand Kazi. So this was a first act of civil disobedience. So why was this a revolutionary act? So here's some quotes from the Chaitanya Charitamrita, where the Chand Kazi is explaining why it was that he was stopping the Sankirtan. So it was in fact because various Hindus had told him that it was against Hinduism. They said, Nimai Pandit has broken the Hindu religious principles. He has introduced the Sankirtan system. So in fact this was his revolution, which we never heard from any scripture. Now the lower classes are chanting the Hare Krishna Mahamantra again and again. For this sinful activity, the entire city of Navadvip will become deserted. According to Hindu scripture, God's name is the most powerful hymn. If everyone hears the chanting of the name, the potency of the hymn will be lost. So these existing Hindus of the existing social order were complaining about this activity that they had never heard before, where this Mahamantra was being given to everyone, including the lower classes. However, in Sri Chaitanya's movement, it is for everyone. And so here we see this kirtan is outdoors, where it's accessible to everyone. And here we see this quote from Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita, where Mahaprabhu says, Jare dakho tare kaho Krishna upadesh, amar aggai guru hoya taro e desh. Instruct everyone to follow the orders of Lord Shri Krishna as they are given in the Bhagavad Gita and Srimad Bhagavatam. In this way, become a spiritual master and try to liberate everyone in this land. This is what he told to the Kurma Brahman. And he said it was for every class of people, so it wasn't just by accident that he was giving it to the lower classes. He said, Kiba Vipro Kibo Nashi Shudra Kane Noi, Jai Krishna Tattveta She Guru Hoy. Whether one is a Brahmin, a sannyasi, or a Shudra, regardless of what he is, he can become a spiritual master if he knows the science of Krishna. And here we have a picture of Namacharya Haridas Thakur, who was none of these things. He was outside of the system, this particular social classification altogether, because he was born in a Muslim family, and Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu considered him the Namacharya, meaning the great spiritual master who instructs everyone in the chanting of the holy name through his own conduct. And not only that, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu said, in every town and village, Prithivi parjanto joto nagaradi gram, sharvatra prachar hoibe moronam. However many towns and villages extend across the earth, in every one the preaching of my name shall be heard. So this is quoted from Chaitanya Bhagavat. So not only through all the people in Navadvip, regardless of their class, but everywhere, all across the earth. That is what Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu had promised. So then what happened after Lord Chaitanya? Well, Lord Chaitanya also said, Trinadapi sunichena taruriva sahishnuna amanina manadena kirtaniya sadahari. So this is a famous verse that all of you know, and in particular it says that we are to be humble, and the Vaishnav practitioner is one who does not expect personal honor. And then, so this is Shikshashtakam 3, the third verse of his instructions. And furthermore, in Shikshashtakam 4, he says that in particular the person does not desire materialistic followers. So then, the Vaishnavas, after Mahaprabhu, many of them were trying to live humbly and were not trying to gather a lot of followers for themselves. And so they were remaining in the main places where Mahaprabhu had preached. But then there were householder Goswamis in Navadvip, there were Babajis in Vrindavan, there was temple worship going on in Puri, and there was the lineage of Mahaprabhu was still going on in all these places, but it was not such a wide movement as we saw in the time when he was here, and especially after the time. So we mentioned Shyamananda Pandit, who was the guru whose lineage descended to Gaur Govinda Swami. So he and Narottam Das Thakur and Srinivasa Acharya, they were preaching in the 16th century and early 17th century, but sometime after that, then the lineage was becoming scarce. So fast forward to 19th century Bengal. So there were many different groups could be found in 19th century Bengal. So there were professional Bhagavatam reciters. So they would make, they were not so much in Bengal, but there were still some. There were Bhagavatam reciters. There were those who were of Advaitavad, so they were impersonalists and they were doing Panchopasana, so they might say that they would worship Krishna among various other deities like Surya and Ganesh and Saraswati and Durga and Shiva. So there were some who were doing that kind of worship which was not really sincere worship of the Supreme Person. There were professional kirtan singers who would sing for money, but they were not necessarily promulgating pure bhakti. There were those who said that they had bhakti to Shakti or to Durga, where they were also asking for some materialistic boons. There were caste Goswamis and Smartha Brahmanas who were very proud of their particular family lineage, their biological hereditary lineage. And there, on the other hand, there were Sahajiyas or Upasampradayas who were engaging in all kinds of activities in the name of bhakti. And then there were people who were engaging in tantra and various practices, some of which were exploitative. And then there were these people here whom there's this cloud over here that you can hardly see left. So there were all these different groups were prominent in 19th century Bengal. Now in the 19th century, there was then a Bengal Renaissance. So this was among the upper castes and middle classes who had contact with the British, and the British were very disdainful of the society that they had come to colonize. And so then these middle classes cast a critical eye on their own society. And on the other hand, they also had an upsurgence of creativity, and so then there was a flowering of Bengali literature. That was why it's called a Renaissance. So in this milieu appeared Kedarnath Datta. He lived from 1838 to 1914. So he was a middle-class educated person. He appeared in the Kayastha caste, which is the second caste of the Bengali caste system. And so he was one of the... So his appearance was among the Bhadralok, which is translated as the genteel people. So these are these middle-class people who, in general, we just described in the previous slide. So he participated in this Bengal Renaissance. He wrote the very first poem in Amitrakar Chanda, which is unrhymed meter, about the devastation of Ula. So sometimes in Bengali literature it's said that Michael Madhusudan Datta was the first person to write this kind of meter, but actually Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur's poem was before that. And he acted as a magistrate in the service of the British colonial government. So he was among the respectable genteel people. Now he came upon this set of groups, and if you may notice that a new cloud has appeared here. This is the Brahmo Samaj. So some people who, among these Bengali Renaissance middle-class people, they came up with this new idea that is kind of impersonal, and kind of socially oriented, and that was basically more, they felt would be more respectable or more appealing to the British. And so that's one new cloud that has appeared among all these clouds which are obscuring the former movement of Gaudiya Vaishnavism. But Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur, he encountered the Brahmo Samaj. He had college friends and so forth, and so he was looking all over Bengal and looking at different literatures and reading different literatures, reading even about Christianity and all kinds of things. And then he found that, wait, there's some of these people are still here, the pure Vaishnavas. So he had to look with his magnifying glass, and he found that current of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, it was very hard to find, but it was still existing. So that's whom he found. So now Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur, I guess I should have mentioned that Kedarnath Datta became Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur. He was a universalist Gaudiya Vaishnav exponent. So he found these pure Vaishnavas, he gathered this Vaishnav literature, which was all lying around in different manuscripts. So these manuscripts were all copied by hand. They were palm leaf manuscripts, and they were very hard to find. So he wanted these to become available to people in general. So he started printing presses for printing those old literatures, and he wrote songs, articles, and books himself. And he even sent English books to universities in the West, like Sri Chaitanya, His Life and Precepts, that he sent to McGill University in the West. And he was doing all this while he was still a householder and magistrate. So he was, this idea, this universalism, which if you read Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur's works, he was amazingly universalist. This already is a kind of a revolution. However, it was not yet the complete revolution. So here's a quote from his book, his novel Jaiva Dharma, where he gives some philosophical exposition. So here he talks about one who is a Muslim by birth may have acquired the nature and all the qualities of a Brahmin, so that he is a Brahmin from the spiritual point of view, but he still remains ineligible for certain material activities. And why is that? Because if one violates social customs, one is guilty of secular impropriety. And members of society who take pride in their social respectability do not condone such activities. So in other words, Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur did write about some sort of respect and compromise with the social custom, which was not quite, so it was more evolutionary than revolutionary. However, he had a vision that went far beyond this. So there are good reasons to think about what is respectable among society in general. As Sri Krishna stated in the Bhagavad Gita, chapter 3, verse 21, whatever action a great man performs, common men follow. So what is respectable does have some importance. However, Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur had a vision that would go beyond what was currently conceivable within that society. So he wrote in Shadjantoshani in 1891, very soon the unparalleled path of Harinam Sankirtan will be propagated all over the planet. Oh, for that day when the fortunate English, French, Russian, Prussian, and American people will take up banners, mridangas, kartals, and perform kirtan through their streets and towns. So this was a vision that he wanted, and he didn't see that he would be able to do this by himself within his own lifetime. So he was praying to Bimala Devi for help. So this is Lord Jagannath in Jagannath Puri, and this is his consort, Bimala Devi, who is also, you can find in the Jagannath Puri temple. He prayed to Bimala Devi for help, for someone to come and help him with this mission, and so he got her mercy, Bimala Prasad. So Bimala Prasad was the fourth son of Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur. He appeared on February 6th, 1874 in Jagannath Puri, where Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur had his house at that time. So his father was Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur, and here is his saintly mother, Srimati Bhagavati Devi. And the child was born with the umbilical cord wrapped around him like a sacred thread. This is a sacred thread. So this was one of the signs that the child was a great personality. And the child was also blessed by the Lord. So Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur's house, which you can see the place on the site there today, is his house, which was the birthplace of Bimala Prasad. This is on this Grand Trunk Road, which is the road down which the chariot festival takes place in Jagannath Puri. So about 6 months afterwards, or not quite 6 months, more like 4 months afterwards, 4 or 5 months, the Rath Yatra was taking place, and as you can see that there is usually millions of people, and they are pulling this cart, and however many people are pulling, sometimes the cart will stop for no reason that anyone can discern. And no matter how many people are pulling these ropes, the same number of people are pulling, then it still won't go. Basically, it's Sri Jagannath's own desire that allows him whether the cart stops or goes. So at this time, in 1874, the cart stopped in front of the house of Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur, this house here, and then it wouldn't move for 3 days. And, again, no matter how many people were pulling. So on the third day, Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur brought his baby son, who was not quite 5 months old, 5 or 6 months old, out onto and took him up to the Jagannath cart. And then, amazingly, the garland of Jagannath fell from Jagannath onto the baby. So that was another sign that this child was blessed by the Lord. And then Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur fed him, his first grains were Jagannath Prasad, the Prasad from Lord Jagannath. And he was a remarkable divine child. So as a small boy, he was, I believe he was 5 years old. He once ate a mango that had not yet been offered to the Lord, and then his father mildly chastised him, and then he took a lifelong vow that he would never eat a mango again. And he kept this vow for the rest of his life, even though, small children do things and they're not really under the rules and regulations, but he was very serious, and he took that vow. And by the age of 7, not only had he memorized all the shlokas of the Bhagavad Gita, but he could explain their verses. And when he was in 7th grade, he got Harinam, first initiation, from his father. And he also had extraordinary ability in mathematics. So fast forwarding, there's a lot of interesting things. His life is, there could be a whole seminar about his life. But we'll just say that in 1900, he got Diksha from Srila Gaur Kishore Das Babaji Maharaj, who is pictured here. So he had been given the name Siddhanta Saraswati due to his amazing scholarship when he was in college, and he was an astronomer and astrologer. And he had worked on the Surya Siddhanta, and so then he got the title Siddhanta Saraswati. And then after Diksha, he was also known by the title of BhaktiSiddhanta Saraswati. In 1905, he took a vow that he would chant at least 300 names per day, 3 lakhs. So that would result in at least 10 million names per month until he had chanted 1 billion names. So it took him 9 years and 4 months to complete the Shatakoti Nam Jagga, this vow that he had taken to chant 1 billion names in Mayapur. And while he was doing this, he was living extremely simply. He was living just in a hut, and he would not even wear shoes, even though, the walking on the path would hurt his feet. He would eat very, very simply and would, keep his hand behind his back and just eat from the floor. So he was extremely austere and undergoing this intense purification of this Nam Yajna. In 1911, there was a debate between Brahmins and Vaishnavas. And when this debate took place, the hereditary Brahmins were thinking that they were better than the Vaishnavas, and then Vaishnavas were saying that actually anyone can be a Vaishnava, and to be a Vaishnava is the topmost. One through this Vaishnav practice, one can attain the topmost goal of human life, which is prem, transcendental divine love. So there was a debate, and the Brahmanas invited him to the debate, and when he began, he started by speaking what the scriptures had said about the glories of Brahmanas. And at first the Brahmanas were very happy because they were thinking, well, even we didn't know all these scriptural glorifications of Brahmanas. But then he started bringing one quote after another about the importance of Vaishnavas and how to be a Vaishnava is the most important thing. And so then he won that debate, and so that established, at least from the perspective, from the objective perspective, that established this this importance of the pure transcendental spiritual culture of the Vaishnavas. So then that his talks at that time were later published in a book, Brahman and Vaishnava, which I have here somewhere. And then this book, if you find it interesting, there's also other writings of his that are on this topic. So we'll talk a little bit about this later. So we had said before that one reason why the Vaishnavas sort of became obscure was this verse where the humble person is one who does not expect personal honor. So Vaishnavas before had sort of had a low profile and were just chanting, and a few among them were discussing among themselves the glories of the Lord, and they weren't necessarily gathering a lot of followers, the pure Vaishnavas. However, Srila Prabhupada BhaktiSiddhanta Saraswati Thakur wrote this amazing song, Dushtamon tumi kisher Vaishnav. O wicked mind, what kind of Vaishnav do you think you are? So this is actually the first line of that song. The song itself is called Vaishnava K, and you can find a book by that title which has this whole song in it. So in particular, here are some things he said after he had taken on this vow and was chanting a billion names. He's addressing this to his own mind, but actually it's instructive for all of us. So he says, he is addressing his mind. Your pretentious show of chanting Lord Hari's holy name in a solitary place is only for the sake of attaining the false prestige of a worldly reputation. Abandoning his servitorship to the lotus feet of Lord Hari and resigning himself to his solitary home, whatever is gained by that exercise can only be the worthless treasure of deception. So one might think that after having done this amazing glorious yajna of a billion names that is actually very difficult to do, you don't find many people are even able to do it, then he was saying that this solitary yajna, that is actually worthless, is what he's saying. He spoke very strong words. He always did. So what he said was that humility means preaching. The Brajabashis are truly infused with life, and therefore they preach. Prana che jar shehetu pruchar. And this was also a very favorite saying of Srila Gaura Govinda Swami. He used to quote this. So those who are infused with life, they don't just stay solitary, they preach. And then so he ends the song, Srila BhaktiSiddhanta Saraswati begs all to loudly sing the names of Lord Hari. So in other words, he told himself and was telling others that he didn't want to just keep this wonderful holy names to himself. He wanted them to be spread throughout the world. So in 1915, so now this is after his billion names, his yajna is complete. He had this divine vision, or maybe it was close to the completion of the yajna. He had this divine vision, and in this visionary trance, he saw all these personalities coming to him. Lord Chaitanya, the 6 Goswamis, and then the people in the lineage just before him, Srila Jagannath Das Babaji, Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur, Srila Gaurkishore Das Babaji, and they were telling him, begin your task of establishing pure religion. And he was asking them, but how can I do that? I have no followers, I have no money, I have nothing. I'm just in this little hut in Mayapur. And so they answered him, behind you, innumerable people, unlimited wealth, and extraordinary scholarship are waiting to help you. Whatever you need at any time will immediately appear. We are always with you. So with that encouragement, he began trying to preach. And this is how seriously he took the preaching mission. He said, this was published later in the Gaudiya magazine, I wish that every selfless, tender-hearted member of the Gaudiya Mutt be prepared to shed 200 gallons of blood for the nourishment of the spiritual body of every individual in human society. And this is not literal blood, but this is, in other words, one's life energy. This is the extent to which one should be ready to dedicate all of one's life energy for spreading the holy name. So we have a revolution in the making. So how did he then start undertaking? Now we know what he was trying to make a revolution about and why he was trying to do it. So how did he do it? So he considered that there was an emergency. So in an emergency in a battlefield, there is something called MASH, which was a television show in the 1970s. And so this is a picture of a helicopter. And MASH stood for Mobile Army Surgical Hospital. So in this battlefield situation, one has to go however one can and rescue people and treat their injuries. So what Srila Prabhupada BhaktiSiddhanta Saraswati Thakur said, not that we need a MASH, but we need a mutt. And so he had his first disciple way back in 1906, but then after he had this vision, he took sannyas. In fact, he founded the sannyas order, and he founded a mutt, Sri Chaitanya Mutt, in Mayapur, 1918, and he founded Sri Gaudiya Mutt in Kolkata in 1920. And so then these two mutts he continued until his disappearance on January 1st, 1937 in Kolkata. So what was he doing during these years of his life, these last 18 years? So one very major thing was that he was printing. So Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur had established these printing presses, and he wanted many literatures to be printed. And it was Srila Prabhupada BhaktiSiddhanta Saraswati Thakur who printed these literatures with their Vaishnava commentaries from the Vaishnavacharyas for the first time. He was using the printing press. So this Srimad Bhagavatam, these Chaitanya Charitamrita with commentaries, these had never been printed before, these Vaishnava commentaries in the history of the world. And he also started a magazine. So Gaudiya was a monthly magazine in Bengali, Harmonist was a monthly magazine in English, and he started a daily newspaper, Nadiya Prakash, and much more printing. So what were some of his revolutionary innovations? So he started this principle of Jukta Vairagya. Now actually this principle comes from the writings of Srila Rupa Goswami, so this is called engaged renunciation. So we don't consider that a renunciate is someone who just has nothing, who is detached for the sake of detachment. That is called Palgu Vairagya, or dry renunciation. Yukta Vairagya means that we engage everything for Krishna's service. So the next thing is that he started this Tridandi Sannyas order. So among the Gaudiya Vaishnavas, Tridandi Sannyas was not being done in the Gaudiya Vaishnava Sampradaya. Although Mahaprabhu himself had taken sannyas, however, after the Goswamis, that sannyas order had died out. But Srila Prabhupada BhaktiSiddhanta Saraswati Thakur made a new sannyas order, of which he was the first person, and then he was taking some principles from other sannyas orders from other Vaishnava Sampradayas in South India, like the Ramanuja Sampradaya, However, he was giving Tridandi sannyas, which I'm not sure if they do, but this is a Vaishnav sannyas, not an impersonalist sannyas. So the Tridandi sannyas means that the sannyasi dedicates their body, words, and deeds to the service of the Lord, and they're completely engaging in yukta vairagya, engaged renunciation. So everything is engaged for the service of the Lord. So for instance, these impersonalist sannyasis, for instance, would not ride around in cars because they thought that a renounced person doesn't ride around in cars. And Srila Prabhupada BhaktiSiddhanta Saraswati Thakur would ride around in big cars, and he would say that he's doing that in order to preach. He would use anything in order to preach. And so that's the difference with Yukta Vairagya. Everything can be used in Krishna's service. He also introduced the Bhagavat Parampara. So this is it's not that he introduced this, the parampara was already existing, but he wrote it down, that this parampara, this disciplic succession, is in the line of teachings. So what is important is who is passing on the teachings. This is Shiksha Parampara, the instructions, Bhagavat Parampara. And he also, so we had talked earlier about the how Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu had this revolution against casteism. So he continued that very strongly, and that even resulted in violence against him, even very early in his Gaudiya Mat, and he fearlessly continued that. This was very much not liked by the social order, certain members of the social order. He also instituted Vishnu Priya Palli. So I'll give a few quotes about these three things in the subsequent slides. And he gave advice to householders. So he had many householder disciples, tens of thousands. He established these mutts, these 64 temples throughout India. However, he said that, so on the foundation of the Kolkata Bagh Bazar Gaudiya Mat, this was established through the services of Jagabandhu Bhaktiranjan. So he said that we have built this building with someone's savings of a lifetime, but what is more important is not the temple in the form of bricks, but the temple in the form of books and ideal lives. So he wanted his disciples to lead ideal lives and to print books, and these are what would spread the movement. So these he considered even more important than these 64 temples. And he mastered this razor's edge of safeguarding pure bhakti while distributing it. So we had seen in these earlier slides how there were all these different groups who were much larger, who had deviated from pure bhakti in different ways, and then at the same time there were some who were doing pure bhakti, but there were just a few, so it wasn't distributed widely. So he is the one who found this system and these standards, that these standards could be kept up, that would safeguard the pure bhakti, and that the purity would be its own force and would allow the mass distribution to make this mass revolution. So this is what he did. And he also had a few disciples in the West. So a handful of Western disciples, such as Sadananda Das, and then there was a couple of ladies in England, and he was the first to send preachers to the West in order to make disciples. So these were some of his revolutionary innovations, and for those who may not be familiar with some of the casteist ideas in India, some people thought that if one crossed the ocean, one would lose one's own caste and one would no longer be a Hindu, if one even just crossed the ocean and left the borders of India. What to speak of bringing back other people and making them followers of the Sanatana Dharma. So this was his revolutionary innovation. So now I'll say a few words about some of these other innovations. So caste no bar. So here's a quote. So this is from a series of articles that was published in his English magazine, The Harmonist. And these articles were written by Professor Nishikant Shanyal, who was one of his disciples and who worked very, very closely with him, and who could be considered one of his mouthpieces. Like many articles, Srila Prabhupada BhaktiSiddhanta Saraswati Thakur would speak with Professor Shanyal, and then Professor Shanyal would then write the article. So here's some interesting quotes. The claim of hereditary was ignored as, so this is talking about Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. The claim of heredity was ignored as being unsuitable and forbidden. All recruits were hereby automatically lifted to the status of a brahmana in the real sense of the term. So this is contrasting the real sense of the term as possessing the proved spiritual disposition by the testimony of the bona fide transcendental teacher. That's the real criterion, not what family one is born as. And then in this next, so this is a series of articles, so this is another issue with that's continuation of that same series. So it is, he's saying that the castial view of Vaishnavism and Brahmanism requires to be discarded for all if one is sincerely inclined to understand the true spirit of those institutions. The Brahman is not a person of this world. The true Brahman must be a constant and exclusive worshipper of Vishnu, i.e. Vaishnav. The mere twice-born is not a Brahman. The Brahman is the Vaishnav in embryo. The Brahman is the disciple of the Vaishnava. And so this is more than we have time to go into, but this is one of his revolutionary innovations. So for instance, he himself was initiating people who were born in hereditary Brahmin families, although he himself was born, as I said, in this Kayastha family. So, according to this hereditary idea, then he wouldn't be allowed to initiate them. But he was saying that that's not the real criterion. The real criterion is who is a Vaishnava. So continuing this quote, but he is not entirely above, he being the Brahmana, is not entirely above all activities of this world, as the latter, the Vaishnava, is. The Brahmana has still got to discharge a duty to the secular society. This duty consists in instructing all classes of society in the principles of the truth. This is the practical side of his discipleship under the Vaishnava preceptor. But all this also applies only to the spiritual or Daiksha Brahmana and not to the hereditary Brahmana, who is not recognized by the scriptures as possessing the spiritual nature, especially in the Kali Yuga. So, again, the hereditary Brahmanas found this very threatening because their social position in the society of the time was dependent on this idea of this hierarchy based on their family lineage. So that was one of his revolutionary innovations. The next, Vishnu Priya Palli. So this was another thing that was revolutionary in the society of his time. So this is a quote from Divine Life, the biography that my mother wrote of him, and in that she translated this passage from Saraswati Jayashri, which was edited by Shripad Sundarananda Vidya Vinod, who is one of the disciples of Srila Prabhupada BhaktiSiddhanta Saraswati Thakur. So this is from that book, page 339. So on September 21st, 1925, Srila Prabhupada BhaktiSiddhanta Saraswati Thakur gave a long lecture to the devotees about how to lead an exemplary devotional life. And in particular, I'm giving an excerpt here, and here are a couple of sentences about what should be done for the women. He said, "But we have been trying for a long time to also give the mothers, the women, the opportunity for devotional service. Of course, those who have the facility and opportunity for devotional service in their own homes do not need a separate residence, but very often we hear that many of them get impeded in their devotional service due to bad association. It will be very beneficial for them if we can build Sri Vishnupriya Palli," so a Palli means neighborhood, "in Sridham Mayapur near the residence of Srimad Mahaprabhu, and they can live there separately from their families and render devotional service. It is necessary to have such an exemplary neighborhood I'm jumping over here. It is necessary to have such an exemplary neighborhood so that the mothers, the women, can read scripture every day, discuss devotional topics with each other, and have ishtagoshti about devotional topics, so they can give up all luxury and live an exemplary saintly life, and always chant the holy name and take care of the ingredients of Srimad Mahaprabhu's service and serve him in every way. So again, this idea that they should leave their families and just be engaged purely in spiritual life with one another, again, this was revolutionary according to the social order of his time. And the last of his revolutionary innovations I'll just touch upon briefly is about his advice to householders. So this was his instructions about the principle of the Grihastha ashram, about couples. And so he said, the wife is not an object of enjoyment of the husband, nor vice versa. Neither the husband nor the wife should claim the services of his or her partner on their own account, and none of them can force their partners to serve them. And if you read all of the statements in this quote, everything is completely symmetric. That they're both basically servants of the Lord. Everyone is a servant of the Lord, and they should see each other only as servants of the Lord. And then again, this is something that was revolutionary according to the time and place that he was in the society that he was in, but he was not afraid of ever of saying the uncompromising truth and starting this revolution. So, Viva la Revolución! Here we have this great Vaishnava revolutionary, Srila Prabhupada BhaktiSiddhanta Saraswati Thakur. So now we have a little time for questions, and we also have time to sing the song about Srila Prabhupada BhaktiSiddhanta Saraswati Thakur. So first I want to open it up for questions, and we can go back to any of the slides. Let me stop sharing. How do I do that? Where's my Zoom? Prabhu, can you stop sharing? Maybe if I exit the slideshow, hopefully. Here. Okay, yes. So yes, if there's any questions.
Hare Krishna, this is Shrestha here.
Hare Krishna, Shrestha. Nice to
Can
see you.
you hear and see me?
I hear you, but I'm seeing Ramesh Prabhu.
Okay. So you said that while speaking about the lifetime of Srila BhaktiSiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, Srila Prabhupada, my question was, he mastered astronomy, astrology, mathematics during his college days. So what did he do after that? Did he utilize those knowledge for his preaching purposes? Did he continue his astrology and astronomy knowledge? What was after that? Because I'm asking this question because as PhDs, we learn so much. We get to learn so much of knowledge. So what did he do after he gained all that knowledge in his life?
So immediately after that, he became a tutor to a prince. So he was applying the knowledge in tutoring. However, the real application of this knowledge was in his preaching. So he attracted many educated people to him. And the fact that he himself was very, he was a genius. He was scholarly, he was educated, and he was a genius. That also helped to attract them. So he was using his education to attract more educated people, and he wanted them also to use their education to attract more educated people. So many of them, as you know, when we take initiation, we get spiritual names, like Srila Guru Maharaj gave me the name Rukmini Devi Dasi. However, and all his disciples, they all had spiritual names. However, when he had them write articles, often he would ask them to use their legal names and to write their degrees after their names. So he would ask them to use their education in their service. And if you read his Bengali commentaries, you see some indication of the extent to which his scholarship was being used. So, for instance, if you read his fifth canto commentaries, then you see that that there is some. Yes, it's more than I can actually go into. And it's actually quite intricate, so I can't say that I've understood it myself. But you can see, for example, how he used his education in math and astronomy, for instance, in those commentaries. However, he did say that there is not astronomy in the Bhagavatam, and he used this English word, astronomy, and he said, just because there is no astronomy in it, do not neglect it. So the European categories of astronomy are different from what is in the Srimad Bhagavatam. Like, what is being described in the Srimad Bhagavatam is on a different plane, that it's a higher plane of reality. So there's some distinction that I can't say that I myself have quite realized yet. So yes, it's a very interesting question, and I've told as much as I can say in this brief subject, but yes, it's a very interesting subject matter. Someone else was saying something?
But Devi, can I add something? Sorry.
Yes, please.
I don't know if this is coming through. I just wanted to point out that he also collated the calendar, which I'm surprised you didn't say since you love the calendar so much. But he took the Panjika and he made it. Hey, Daddy, can you? Yeah, it's still used. It's still used. So yeah, but can you turn your volume down? Yeah, go, because we're both watching on two screens. Anyway, so we have the appearance days and disappearance days of all our Vaishnava acharyas, and I don't even know the rules for calculating everything, and like the rules for yoga. He kind of made it more systematic and systematized it. So that's how we have all of that. And he printed it, and he trained people in how to do that. And most of our that requires a lot of mathematics and astronomy, not even astrology, but actual astronomy. And in our sampradaya, there are people who have learned that from him. I mean, it's been passed down. So that's how we're able to have all these festivals, and you can, and know, because otherwise you'd have to read all of Hari Bhakti Vilas. And also he made sure that we collected all the information about the people who came after Hari Bhakti Vilas, like Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur.
Yeah, thanks. Thank you so much.
Yes, thank you. That was.
You had a question?
Yes, Hare Krishna. Please accept my obeisances. Thank you, Mother Rukmini, for a wonderful lecture. I had exams and stuff like that, and then I was thinking, should I join? Should I not join? And I'm super glad I joined. I learned a lot about even though we've heard a lot of these leelas, these pastimes so many times about Srila BhaktiSiddhanta Saraswati Thakur. They're so ever fresh, and I really I actually was kind of adding on to a point about, you were mentioning something about giving spiritual life. I've heard his grace Vaisheshika Prabhu, when he says, when you go out and give a book or a pamphlet, BhaktiSiddhanta Saraswati, he used to encourage his disciples to go pass around some of the publications, and when they reject you, he said that gives you spiritual blood. So I think it was I thought that was a very nice point that you made. And as well as I'd like to just tell everybody that there's this book I've been reading recently, preparing for this. It's called Upakyane Upadesh, which are like really nice and easy to understand stories. Srila BhaktiSiddhanta Saraswati's English was very complex for dull-headed person like me. But the Upakyana Upadesh it's really fun to hear, and you learn actually a lot. But Mother Rukmini, my question is, Bhaktivinoda Thakur, as you were mentioning, was a spirit, was so I think you used the word Vaishnava. He saw he expanded the Vaishnava movement by breaking down barriers. What was the word you used?
Universalist?
Universalist, yes. And Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati, he kind of like made this into a institution. And I understand that he had, I was just listening today to the podcast of Chaitanya Charan Prabhu and Madhavananda Prabhu. Very nice podcast. And they were mentioning this point of Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati's brother, Lalit Prasad. And they had, there were two different ideas of spreading the mud. And I was just, I'm trying to clarify what that difference was. And between, I know Srila Prabhupada, but Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada met with Lalit Prasad, and they had a meeting as well. So I'd like to understand that a little bit, and what was the difference between the two philosophies.
I'm afraid that I can't say much about it. That is not something that I'm very familiar with. So one thing that Srila Prabhupada Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur was very much emphasizing, so there are these two problems. So one thing that I talked about was this hereditary caste system, and on the other side there were the Sahajiyas, who considered, so Sahajiya literally means easy, so they considered a devotional service to be a cheap thing, and then and in the name of devotional service, people were saying, well, you know, I'm Krishna, and so there were people who were saying that, you know, they're Babajis in Vrindavan, but then they would hang out with many of the widows who were in Vrindavan and say that these are my wives or these are my gopis, and you know, they were doing all kinds of things that were not respectable. You know, they were basically exploiting bhakti. So the degree to which one has to go to guard against that, and the practices that one and regulations that one has to institute in order to guard against that and make that stay very far away from the institution, I believe that was the nature of their disagreement, that they had different ideas about that. However, I guess I'm on YouTube, but the thing is, I would say don't quote me on that, because you know, I'm not really an expert on that subject.
Thank you very much. Hare Krishna.
Thank you, and thank you for your enthusiasm. I as far as I remember, you sort of began the big celebration of this festival in Columbus in many years past. So I really appreciate your enthusiasm for Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur Prabhupada. Hari.
Yeah, it's all the mercy of the Vaishnavas. I heard one lecture that we should celebrate every Acharya's festivals, like huge. So I think I thought Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati was Prabhupada was a very good place to start. So hopefully in the future we can have many more festivals celebrating the Vaishnavas.
Hare Krishna Mata. Ramesh here. Are you able to hear me, Mata?
Yes,
Hare
and see you.
Thank you for the very amazing discourse. And Mata, you will be able to share those slides with us, right? You can email those slides or whatever you're showing.
Yes, and hopefully, now to give you the links. Anyway, probably the links. It's better if
you can just email, so that you know.
Then you'll have all the links.
Because those seem to be very valuable slides. Mata, only one question I had. I just wanted. This is like more. I want your comments. This is like when in Ultradanga, Srila Prabhupada met Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati's Divine Grace. So there he was mentioning this cannot wait for the Indian freedom movement. So can you a little bit elaborate on that? What Bhaktisiddhanta Maharaj was saying at that time to Prabhupada, which... So you can you a little bit comment on that? Yeah.
Yes, it's very interesting. So the Indian freedom movement, and because he was preaching to the educated people, many of them were in that Indian freedom movement because they felt that this was very important. So one thing is that the real revolution is a revolution in consciousness. So if one has the mentality of the oppressor and then one throws off the shackles of the oppressor, then eventually one will still reproduce the system of the oppressor, and it'll, instead of the one class being the oppressor and the other class being the oppressed, then they'll change places. But without the and this is all governed by the modes of nature. Is these flow of the modes of nature, and then these different people are taking different roles, but it's the same phenomenon that is, people are just changing places. So the real revolution has to be a revolution in consciousness, and without a revolution in consciousness, then that a true revolution doesn't take place. And so his emphasis was on the revolution in consciousness. That was what he felt was more urgent, and that was what he felt needed to be throughout society.
Thank you, Manda. So
That-
basically, Maharaj was mentioning about the bodily concept of life. We need to go above it, right?
That yes, not exactly above it, but sort of like to the root beyond it. So because this revolution then would inform the the bodily revolution, our bodily practices and so forth. So it would actually entail a more meaningful and deeper revolution than simply the political revolution without the revolution in consciousness.
Okay. Thank you, Manda. Hare Krishna. So we are nearly at time. So I'm not seeing any more questions. So I'm seeing a lot of thank you comments. So thank you so much for taking your time today and help us in this glorification. So I think the next prayer we'll have a Narsimha prayer. Hari, you can do the Narsimha prayers today?
Yeah, let me just go downstairs. Is that okay?
While Hari is going downstairs, a small announcement. So we want to dedicate this Narsimha prayers to the health of His Grace Chandrabhanu Prabhu from our congregation. Just let's all of us pray to Srila Prabhupada and the Lord that Prabhu can have good health. So that's what say and.
Hare Krishna, can you hear me?
Yes, Prabhu.
Okay. Everybody can chant along. We will with their mics muted, hopefully.
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Hare Hare Ram, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna. Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Rama. Jaya Jaya Prabhupada, Prabhupada. Jaya Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Jaya Gurudev, 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 Jaya Gurudev, Jai Gaura Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Hari Bol. Srila BhaktiSiddhanta Saraswati Thakur Maharaj Prabhupada ki
Jai.
Prabhupada ki
Jai.
Thakur ki
Jai. Thank you, Hari. Thank you, Hari, for the prayers. I just have a couple of quick announcements, and we'll pause for the today. So the next Ekadasi is on Monday, the 8th. It's Vijay Ekadasi. So we have our kirtans from 6 p.m. to 9 p.m. If anybody is interested, please contact me for leading the kirtan. And the main festival is on 28th, the Sunday. We have Gaur Purnima. So please mark your calendars, and we'll have a grand festival celebration on that day. And actually, it's the New Year for the all Gaudiya Vaishnavas. Starts from the
Gauranga!
Thank you, everybody, and thank you especially Rukmini Mataji for giving us a very nice discourse. We'll end with Vaishnava prayers. Vancha
Kalpatarubhyascha kripa sindhubhya eva cha patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo
Ananta Koti
namaha.
Vaishnava Vrinda ki.
Jai!
Hi.